The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. James Kelly sat in a cracked vinyl booth, his fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Outside, snow fell in thick, wet clumps against the window, each flake catching the red and green neon that blinked Merry Christmas in stuttering intervals. Inside, the jukebox played a tinny version of Silent Night that made the whole scene feel like a cruel joke. Across from him, the chair was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. The menu still lay open where she left it, a smudge of her lipstick on the rim of her water glass, like evidence of a crime scene. James stared at that smudge, at the perfect imprint of a mouth that had just told him his daughter was baggage. "You're a great guy, James," she'd said, standing up so fast her purse knocked over the salt shaker. "Really you are, but I'm not ready to play stepmom on a first date. Maybe if you were at a different place in your life. A different place. As if loving Maya, as if being her father, was a location he could simply move away from. As if his daughter was a problem that could be solved by being someone else. Somewhere else, something else entirely. The waitress. A tired woman named Deb, who'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times before, slid the check onto the table without making eye contact. $23 for 2 waters, 1 coffee, and the death of hope. James reached for his wallet, his thumb brushing against a photo tucked inside. Maya, age 7, missing her 2 front teeth, smiling like the world was made of wonder. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor. "Maya's asleep. Take your time. Merry Christmas, James." Take your time. He had all the time in the world now. He had the rest of Christmas Eve to sit in this booth and wonder when exactly he'd become undateable, when his worth as a man had been reduced to his status as a father, as if the two couldn't coexist in the same body. The small wrapped gift sat on the table beside his coffee cup. He'd spent 40 minutes in the drugstore, try to find something nice enough to be a first date gift from Maya to his date, something that said, "My daughter wants you to feel welcome." It was a candle. Vanilla. Safe. Stupid. James picked up the gift, turned it over in his hands. The tape was crooked. Maya had helped him wrap it, her small fingers pressing down the edges with the kind of concentration she usually reserved for her spelling homework. "She's gonna love it, Daddy," Maya had said, her eyes bright with the kind of faith that only children possess, the kind that believes adults know what they're doing. He pressed his thumb against the corner of the wrapping paper, felt it give way. $40 he didn't have, spent on a woman who couldn't see past his so-called baggage to the man underneath. $40 that could have been Maya's new winter boots, the ones with the stars on the sides that she'd been eyeing at the thrift store. The bell above the diner door chimed. James didn't look up. He'd learned not to turn every time someone walked in, learned not to hope that maybe she'd come back, that maybe she'd reconsider, that maybe... James Kelly? The voice was crisp, professional, and entirely unexpected. James looked up. The woman standing beside his booth didn't belong in this diner. She didn't belong in this neighborhood. Hell, she probably didn't belong in the same zip code. Her coat was black cashmere, the kind that cost more than James's rent. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a style that suggested she'd come from somewhere important and was on her way to somewhere more important still. Her eyes were gray, the color of steel, and when they fixed on James, he felt like a specimen under a microscope. "I'm sorry," James said, his voice rough from disuse. "Do I know you?" "No." The woman slid into the booth across from him without being invited, her movements precise and economical. "But I know you. James Kelly, 32, freelance graphic designer, single father to Maya Kelly, age 7. You live in a rent-controlled apartment in Riverside. Your credit score is 541. You're 3 months behind on your electric bill and 6 weeks behind on your car payment. You eat ramen 4 nights a week, so your daughter can have fresh vegetables. You read to her every night before bed, always 2 chapters, never one. And 2 hours ago, a woman named Jennifer Hartman walked out on your first date because she wasn't interested in dating a single father. James's blood went cold. Who the hell are you? The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a leather folder, the kind lawyers carry. She opened it with a snap and slid it across the table. Inside was a photograph of an infant, maybe 6 months old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his face. My name is Susan Prescott, the woman said. That's my nephew, Benjamin. His mother, my sister, died 4 weeks ago in a car accident. His father was never in the picture. I'm his only living relative, which makes me his legal guardian. Or it would, if the state of New York agreed that I'm fit to raise him. James stared at the photograph, then at Susan. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't understand what this has to do with me. The court has given me 72 hours to prove I can provide a stable, nurturing home environment for Benjamin, Susan continued, her voice steady, mechanical, as if she were delivering a quarterly earnings report. If I can't, he goes into foster care on December 27th. The social worker assigned to our case, a woman named Mrs. Eleanor Gable, has made it clear that a single, childless career woman who works 80-hour weeks and lives in a sterile penthouse is not her definition of an appropriate guardian. Again, James said slowly, "What does this have to do with me?" Susan leaned forward. In the flickering neon light, James could see the cracks in her armor, the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, the slight tremor in her left hand, the way her jaw clenched when she mentioned her sister. Mrs. Gable's report was very specific. Susan said, Benjamin needs a family, not just a legal guardian, but a home with warmth, experience, stability. She needs to see a father figure, someone who knows how to hold a baby when he cries at 2 a.m, someone who can prove that a child won't be raised by nannies and boarding schools, someone who can show her that this child will be loved, not just provided for. James felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're not serious. I'm offering you a contract, Susan said. She pulled another document from her folder and placed it on top of Benjamin's photograph. A marriage of convenience. You and Maya move into my penthouse. You provide the domestic expertise and the family image that Mrs. Gable requires. In exchange, I pay off your debts, all of them. I secure Maya's enrollment in the Ashford Academy, full scholarship, including college prep and extracurriculars. I establish a trust fund for her education, and I pay you a salary of $10,000 per month for the duration of our arrangement. The diner seemed to tilt. James gripped the edge of the table. You want to buy me? I want to hire you, Susan corrected. There's a difference. This is a business arrangement with clear terms and a defined end date. Once the custody evaluation is complete and Benjamin is legally mine, approximately 6 to 8 months, we dissolve the marriage. You walk away with enough money to start fresh. Maya gets an education that will change her life, and Benjamin gets to stay with his family instead of becoming another number in the system. James pushed the contract back across the table. Lady, I don't know what kind of world you live in, but in mine, we don't treat marriage like a corporate merger. In my world, Susan said quietly, a 6-month-old baby is about to lose the only family he has left because I don't fit into society's narrow definition of what a mother should look like. In my world, your daughter is going to grow up in a system that punishes poverty and rewards privilege. I'm offering you a chance to change that for both of them by lying to a social worker, by giving her what she wants to see. Susan's gray eyes held his. Mrs. Gable doesn't care about love, Mr. Kelly. She cares about check boxes. Two-parent household. Check. Experienced father. Check. Financial stability. Check. We give her the picture she needs, and two children get the futures they deserve. James looked down at the photograph of Benjamin. The baby was staring directly at the camera, his expression solemn, as if he already understood that his fate was being decided by strangers in diners and courtrooms. Why me? James asked. Because Jennifer Hartman was right about one thing. Susan said, "You're a great guy. I've been watching you for 3 days, Mr. Kelly. I've seen you walk Maya to school, then work 16-hour days to make rent. I've seen you save your last $20 to buy her a birthday cake. I've seen the way other parents look at you at pickup, like you're some kind of saint for doing what mothers do every day without recognition. You have exactly what Mrs. Gable is looking for, and exactly what I don't have: patience, warmth, and the ability to make a child feel safe. And what do you have that I need?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. "Money," Susan said simply. "Enough to make sure Maya never has to watch you skip meals, so she can eat. Enough to give her a future that doesn't involve scholarships and prayer. Enough to make sure that when she grows up, she never has to choose between her dreams and her survival." The jukebox had moved on to "I'll Be Home for Christmas." Deb was wiping down the counter, preparing to close. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering the parking lot in white. Before the contract is signed and lives are changed forever. If you believe every child deserves a home, hit that like button and tell us your city in the comments. It helps this story reach those who need it most. James picked up the contract. The paper was heavy, expensive, official, the kind of paper that meant something in a court of law. 72 hours, he asked. 72 hours, Susan confirmed. Mrs. Gable arrives for the first home evaluation on December 27th at 9 a.m. We need to be married and living together before then. The wedding can be a civil ceremony. Simple, clean. A judge I know can file the paperwork tonight. And if I say no, for the first time, Susan's mask cracked. Her eyes went to the photograph of Benjamin, and something in her expression shifted, grief, raw and recent, bleeding through the cracks. "Then I lose him," she whispered. "I lose the last piece of my sister, and he loses the only blood family he has left." James thought about Maya, asleep in their apartment, probably sprawled across his bed because she liked to sleep where she could smell him on the pillows. He thought about the overdue notices stacked on the kitchen counter. He thought about the job he'd lost last month when his client went bankrupt without paying him. He thought about the look on the cashier's face at the grocery store when his card was declined. He thought about the woman who'd walked out on him tonight, and all the women before her who'd done the same. He thought about the way people saw him, as less than, as damaged goods, as a man whose greatest achievement was also his greatest flaw. He thought about a 6-month-old baby who'd never asked to be born into this mess, who'd never asked to be orphaned, who'd never asked to be the pawn in a custody battle between bureaucracy and blood. "If I do this," James said slowly, "if I sign this contract, I need to know one thing. Do you love him? Benjamin. Do you actually want him, or is he just another acquisition?" Susan's jaw tightened. For a moment, James thought she might stand up and leave. Then she spoke, her voice low and strained. "My sister called me 2 hours before the accident," she said. She told me she'd finally found the courage to leave his father. She asked if she could stay with me, just for a few weeks, until she got on her feet. I told her I was in the middle of a merger. I told her to call me back after my meeting. She died on the way to my apartment, Mr. Kelly. She died because I chose a boardroom over my own blood. So no, I don't know if I love Benjamin yet. I've barely held him, but I owe him a chance. I owe my sister that much. The diner was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of snow against glass. James picked up the pen Susan had placed on the table. "One condition," he said. "Maya has to agree. I won't make this decision without her." Susan nodded. "Then we talk to her tonight. The ceremony is scheduled for midnight. We have 3 hours." James signed his name at the bottom of the contract, his handwriting shaky, unsteady. Beside his signature, Susan signed hers, bold, confident, certain. "We are human," James said. "That's a problem. We're trying to fake something that can't be faked." Susan looked up at him, her gray eyes exhausted. "Then what do we do?" "We stop performing," James said. "We start actually trying. Not for Mrs. Gable. For them." He gestured toward Maya, who was gently touching Benjamin's tiny hand, and the baby, who was watching her with wide, curious eyes. Susan stared at the children, something unreadable crossing her face. "I don't know if I can." "Then learn," James said softly. "The way Maya said. Practice until you get good at it." But as Mrs. Gable's car disappeared into morning traffic, James wondered if they had enough time to learn something that couldn't be taught. How to make a family out of strangers before the state decided they weren't worth saving at all. What crisis would force them to stop pretending and start becoming the family they claimed to be? The fever started on day 9. James woke at 2:17 a.m. to Benjamin screaming. Not his usual hungry cry, but something sharper, more desperate. He grabbed his phone for light and stumbled from the guest room toward the nursery, his heart already racing. Susan was already there, pacing with Benjamin in her arms, her expression hovering between panic and fury. She was wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than hospital bills, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, making her look younger, more vulnerable. "He won't stop," she said when James appeared in the doorway. "I've tried everything. I fed him. I changed him. I rocked him. I sang to him. Nothing works. Something's wrong." James crossed to her, pressed his hand against Benjamin's forehead. The baby's skin was burning. "He's got a fever. 102, maybe higher. When did it start?" "I don't know. He seemed fine at bedtime. I put him down at 8, like you showed me. He woke up at midnight fussy, but I thought he was just having a hard night. But then he got hotter and hotter and—" Susan's voice cracked. "James, what if it's serious? What if he needs a hospital? Let me check him first." James took Benjamin gently from Susan's arms. The baby's cry intensified when he moved, his little face red and streaked with tears. James carried him to the changing table, began checking his ears, his throat, feeling for swollen glands. "What are you doing?" Susan demanded. "We should call someone. A doctor. My pediatrician has an emergency line. And they'll tell you to monitor him and bring him in if the fever goes above 103 or if he shows signs of respiratory distress." James said calmly, "This is what babies do, Susan. They get fevers. Usually it's nothing, just their immune system figuring things out. But we watch them. We keep them hydrated. We bring the fever down slowly. You're not a doctor." "No, but I'm a father. I've done this before." James found what he was looking for. Benjamin's left ear was red and inflamed. He's got an ear infection. It's painful but treatable. We need infant acetaminophen and a warm compress. Susan was already moving, pulling out her phone. I'll have the pharmacy deliver. Susan. James's voice stopped her. It's 2 in the morning. No pharmacy delivers at 2 in the morning. You have to go get it. There's a 24-hour CVS 6 blocks from here. I can't leave him. What if he gets worse? Then I'll call 911. But he won't get worse in the 15 minutes it takes you to get medicine. He needs you to be the person who can handle this. Right now, that means going to pharmacy. Susan stared at Benjamin, then at James. For a moment, James thought she might refuse, might insist on calling her private doctor, or demanding some impossible solution that money could buy. Instead, she grabbed her coat and was out the door in 30 seconds, leaving James alone with a screaming infant and the growing realization that something was shifting in this arrangement. Benjamin cried for 23 minutes straight. James held him, walked with him, sang every stupid song he could remember from Maya's baby days. Nothing helped. The fever had the baby locked in misery, and all James could do was be present for it. Let Benjamin know he wasn't alone in the pain. When Susan burst back through the door, her hair wild from the wind, snow dusting her expensive coat, she had 3 different types of infant fever reducer, a thermometer, gauze pads, and a stuffed animal shaped like a bear. I didn't know which kind you meant, she said breathlessly, dumping everything on the kitchen counter. So I got all of them. And the pharmacist said the bear was good for teething babies, and I thought maybe he could use it when he feels better, and... Susan. James smiled despite the exhaustion. You did good. The dye-free one. We'll give him 0.4 milliliters. They worked together in the dim kitchen, measuring medicine with the precision of chemists. Susan held Benjamin while James administered the dose, the baby's screams temporarily pausing as he swallowed the sweet liquid. Then Susan carried him to the rocking chair by the nursery window while James prepared the warm compress. Talk to him, James said softly, kneeling beside the chair. Tell him a story. Tell him anything. He needs to hear that you're not scared. But I am scared, Susan whispered. I'm terrified. When I was in the pharmacy, all I could think was, what if I'm too late? What if he needs me and I'm 6 blocks away buying the wrong medicine? That's what being a parent is, James said. He pressed the warm compress gently against Benjamin's ear. It's being scared every single day that you're not enough, that you're missing something, that you're going to fail when it matters most. But you show up anyway. You run to the pharmacy at 2 in the morning. You learn which medicine works. You sit in this chair and hold him through the fever until it breaks. Susan looked down at Benjamin, whose cries were finally starting to soften. My sister would have known what to do. She would have been ready for this. Your sister would have been just as scared as you are, James said. First-time mothers always are. But she also would have been proud of you. You didn't freeze tonight, Susan. You didn't call your assistant or throw money at the problem. You went to the pharmacy. You got him what he needed. That's motherhood. Susan's eyes filled with tears. The first time James had seen her cry since the diner. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be her. She was warm and open, and everything I'm not. How am I supposed to raise her son when I'm nothing like her? You're not supposed to be her, James said firmly. You're supposed to be you. Benjamin doesn't need a replacement mother. He needs the mother he has. And that's you, flawed and scared and learning as you go, just like every other parent on the planet. They sat in silence, the three of them, as the fever medicine began to work. Benjamin's body gradually relaxed against Susan's chest. His breathing evened out. The angry red in his cheeks faded to pink. By 3:30 he was asleep, his tiny hand curled around Susan's finger. "I can take him," James offered quietly. "Put him in his crib so you can sleep." "No." Susan's voice was fierce, protective. "I want to hold him a little longer, just to make sure he's really okay." James nodded, understanding. He stood to leave, then felt Susan's hand catch his wrist. "James, thank you for teaching me, for not making me feel stupid for not knowing." "You're not stupid, Susan. You're just human. Welcome to the club." He left her rocking slowly in the moonlight, holding her nephew like he was the most precious thing in the world. And James realized with a jolt of surprise that somewhere in the last 9 days, this had stopped being just a contract. We are at the turning point of James and Susan's lives. If you're rooting for this family to survive the storm, hit that subscribe button right now and join our community. Every sub tells the algorithm that stories of hope and courage still matter. Stick with us, because the most shocking part of their deal is about to be revealed. But just when they were beginning to trust each other, someone from Susan's past was about to expose the one secret that could destroy everything they'd built. The email arrived on a Wednesday. Susan was at work, sitting through a board meeting about the Singapore expansion, when her phone buzzed with an alert from an unknown sender. She almost deleted it without reading. Then she saw the subject line, "Interesting business arrangement, Ms. Prescott." The message contained a single attachment, a photograph of the marriage contract she'd drawn up with James. Every clause was visible, including the sections about payment terms, the dissolution timeline, and the explicit statement that the marriage was for custody purposes only. Below the image was a single line of text. "I wonder what Mrs. Gable would make of this." Susan's blood went cold. She excused herself from the meeting, walked to her private office on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She called James immediately. "We have a problem," she said the moment he answered. "Someone has the contract. Someone knows." 40 minutes later, James stood in Susan's office, Maya in tow, because he couldn't find childcare on such short notice. Maya sat in the corner with headphones and a tablet, while James and Susan huddled over her laptop, staring at the incriminating email. Who else knew about this? James demanded. Who else had access to that document? Just my lawyer, and he signed an NDA that would end his career if he broke it. Susan was pacing, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. This had to come from somewhere else. Someone who had access to my home office or my computer. Your competitors? Maybe. Probably. Susan's jaw clenched. Richard Tremaine. He's been trying to force me out of the CEO position for 2 years. If he could prove I'm unstable, if he could show the board that I'm running some kind of custody scam, he'd have leverage. James finished. Enough to destroy you and take Benjamin. Susan sank into her chair, her face pale. If Mrs. Gable sees this, she'll pull Benjamin immediately. She already suspects we're performing. This will confirm it. She'd have proof that we're lying to the court, that we entered into a fraudulent marriage for the sole purpose of manipulating the custody evaluation. James sat down across from her. So what do we do? I don't know. Susan's voice was hollow. For the first time in my professional life, I don't have a strategy. I can't buy my way out of this. I can't negotiate with someone who wants to watch me burn. Then we tell the truth. Susan laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is that I paid you to marry me. The truth is that we're strangers pretending to be a family. The truth will put Benjamin in foster care and put us both under investigation for fraud. That's not the truth anymore, James said quietly. The truth is that we started as a business arrangement. Yes, but somewhere along the way, it became real. You love Benjamin. I've seen it. When he had that fever, you weren't acting for Mrs. Gable's benefit. You were genuinely terrified. You ran through snow at 2 a.m. to get him medicine. That's not a performance. That's motherhood. Mrs. Gable won't see it that way. Then we make her see it. James leaned forward. We go to her first, before whoever sent this email does. We tell her everything, the contract, the arrangement, the reason we started this, but we also show her what it's become. We show her the midnight fevers and the first smiles and 1,000 small moments where we stopped pretending and started being what those kids needed us to be. That's insane. We be confessing to fraud. We be confessing to being human, James corrected, to making an unconventional choice in an impossible situation. We be showing her that sometimes family isn't about blood or tradition or doing things the right way. Sometimes it's about people choosing to show up for each other when the world says they shouldn't. Susan stared at him like he'd suggested they jump off her 32nd floor balcony. You're willing to risk everything on the hope that a cynical state social worker will suddenly embrace our unconventional family structure? I'm willing to risk everything on the truth, James said, because the alternative is letting some corporate vulture control our lives. And I'm done letting other people decide what my family looks like. Our family, the words hung in the air between them. Susan's eyes widened slightly, as if she just heard something she hadn't expected. You said, our family, she whispered. Yeah. James met her gaze steadily. I did, because somewhere between the diner and the fever, and watching you rock Benjamin at 3 a.m, that's what we became. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you bought Maya that ridiculous amount of clothes. Maybe when you asked me to teach you to be a mother instead of pretending you already knew. But it happened, Susan. We're a family. Messy and weird and built on a contract, but a family nonetheless. Susan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mrs. Gable is never going to believe that. Then we make her believe it. James said, we call her right now. We show her the email. We tell her everything. And we fight like hell to keep what we built. Susan picked up her phone, her hand trembling slightly. If this doesn't work, if she takes Benjamin, I want you to know that I don't regret it. The contract, the arrangement, any of it. Even if we lose, I got 9 weeks of being his mother. That's more than I thought I deserved. You deserve everything, James said softly. You just needed someone to show you that. Susan dialed Mrs. Gable's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Mrs. Gable, Susan said when the social worker answered, this is Susan Prescott. I need to meet with you immediately. There's something I need to tell you about my marriage to James. Something you need to hear from me before you hear it from anyone else. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mrs. Gable's voice, sharp and alert. I'll be at your apartment in 1 hour. And Miss Prescott, this had better be good. For Benjamin's sake. The line went dead. Susan set down the phone and looked at James with an expression that was equal parts terror and determination. Well, she said, I guess we're about to find out if truth really does set you free, or if it just gets you investigated for fraud. But as they gathered their courage for the most important conversation of their lives, neither of them noticed Maya in the corner, headphones off, tablet forgotten, quietly listening to every word and understanding more than any 7-year-old should have to understand about how easily love can be taken away. Would Mrs. Gable see their confession as honesty or confirmation of her darkest suspicions? And could a family built on a lie survive the brutal light of truth? Mrs. Gable arrived in 45 minutes, not an hour. She sat in Susan's living room with the marriage contract spread on the coffee table between them, her expression carved from granite. "Let me make sure I understand," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "You two entered into a business arrangement disguised as a marriage for the explicit purpose of deceiving the court and manipulating the custody evaluation. Is that an accurate summary?" "Yes," Susan said. Her voice was steady, but James could see her hands shaking in her lap. "That's how it started." "How it started?" Mrs. Gable's eyebrow raised. "I'm fascinated to hear how this story ends, Miss Prescott." James leaned forward. "It starts with two broken people," he said. "A single father who'd been rejected so many times he'd stopped believing he deserved love, and a CEO who'd spent her whole life building walls because she thought that's what strength looked like. Neither of us was looking for a family. We were looking for a solution. And you found one in fraud," Mrs. Gable said acidly. "We found one in each other," Susan corrected quietly. "The contract was real. The reasons we wrote it were real. But what happened after, that was real too. James taught me how to hold Benjamin without being afraid I'd break him. He taught me that it's okay to not have all the answers, that sometimes the best thing you can do for a child is admit you're learning. He showed me that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And Susan showed me that I wasn't damaged goods," James added. "That being a father didn't make me less valuable. It made me more valuable. She showed Maya that someone could choose us, not despite our circumstances, but because of them. She gave my daughter the first glimpse she's ever had of what it looks like when someone chooses to stay." Mrs. Gable was silent for a long moment, her eyes moving between them. "These are pretty words, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Prescott, but pretty words don't change the fact that you lied to me, lied to the court, and entered into an illegal arrangement to circumvent the custody evaluation process." "You're right," Susan said. "We did all those things, and I can't undo them. But I can tell you that Benjamin is loved. He is safe. He is thriving. And he has two parents who will fight like hell to protect him. Not because a contract says we have to, but because we can't imagine our lives without him anymore." "Two parents," Mrs. Gable repeated. She picked up the contract, scanned the dissolution clause. "According to this, your marriage was designed to last 6 to 8 months, just long enough to complete the custody evaluation. Are you telling me you've changed those terms?" James and Susan looked at each other. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't had time to negotiate what came next. The contract was clear. Once custody was secured, they would divorce, divide the assets, and go their separate ways. "I don't want the contract anymore," Susan said softly. "I want whatever comes naturally. If that's divorce in 6 months, then that's what happens. But if it's something else, if it's actually building the family we've been pretending to be, then I want that too. I want the choice, the real choice. Not the one dictated by lawyers and custody evaluations." "I want that too," James said. He reached across the space between them and took Susan's hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "I want to see what we become when we're not performing for anyone, when it's just us figuring it out day by day." Mrs. Gable set down the contract. Her expression was unreadable. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, she said. "I've seen every kind of custody situation you can imagine. Biological parents who should never have been given children, foster families that treat kids like paychecks, adoptive parents who want a designer baby to complete their perfect image. And I've learned to spot the difference between people who want children and people who want the idea of children. She stood, began pacing Susan's living room. When I first came here, I saw what I expected to see. A corporate woman who wanted to check the family box. A father who'd been hired to complete the picture. I saw a sterile apartment and a business arrangement and every red flag in the book. Susan's face went pale. James's grip on her hand tightened. But then I came back, Mrs. Gable continued, unannounced, as promised. And do you know what I saw? I saw a woman holding a sick baby at 3 a.m, terrified but present. I saw a man teaching a woman how to burp an infant, patient and kind. I saw a little girl who feels safe enough in this home to voice her fears. I saw refrigerator art and board books and all the small, messy evidence of actual family life. She turned to face them directly. I also saw two people who were trying too hard, who were performing their roles instead of living them. But what I didn't see, what I was looking for and never found, was malice. I never saw cruelty or neglect or indifference. I saw two deeply flawed people trying their damnedest to do right by children who needed them. Mrs. Gable. Susan started, but the social worker held up her hand. I'm not finished. This contract is problematic. This arrangement is unorthodox. By the letter of the law, I should report this to the court and recommend Benjamin be removed from your home immediately. Susan made a sound like she'd been struck. James felt his world tilting. However, Mrs. Gable continued, the letter of the law isn't always in the best interest of the child. And my job, my only job, is to determine what serves Benjamin's welfare. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file my final evaluation report next week. In it, I'm going to recommend that custody be granted to Susan Prescott permanently, with James Kelly as the secondary guardian. I'm going to note that while your relationship began under unusual circumstances, it has evolved into a genuine family unit that serves Benjamin's emotional and physical needs. James felt Susan's hand go limp in his. You're not taking him? I'm not taking him, Mrs. Gable confirmed. But I am watching you. For the next year, I'll be conducting quarterly check-ins, unannounced. If at any point I see evidence that this arrangement is harming Benjamin or Maya, if I see that you reverted to treating this like a business transaction instead of family, I will not hesitate to revisit my recommendation. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, James managed. Good. Mrs. Gable picked up her briefcase, preparing to leave. At the door, she paused. Ms. Prescott, for what it's worth, I think your sister will be proud. Not because you did everything right, but because when you realized you were wrong, you had the courage to tell the truth. That's more than most people manage. Susan's voice was thick with tears. Thank you. After Mrs. Gable left, Susan and James sat in stunned silence on the couch. Benjamin was asleep in his nearby carrier, oblivious of the fact that his entire future had just been decided. Maya had fallen asleep in the chair, exhausted from the tension. We won, Susan whispered. We actually won. We did, James agreed. Then more quietly, so what happens now? To us. Susan turned to face him, her gray eyes clear and certain. We tear up the contract. We start over. No dissolution clause, no payment terms, no predetermined ending. We try this for real. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but we try. And if it doesn't work, Then at least we'll know we gave an honest chance. Susan reached for the marriage contract on the coffee table. Without hesitation, she tore it in half, then in quarters, then into pieces too small to ever be reconstructed. That's the old deal. Here's the new one. We show up. We try. We love these kids as hard as we can, and we figure out the rest as we go. James helped her gather the pieces of the contract, carried them to the kitchen trash. As he watched the remnants of their business arrangement disappear beneath coffee grounds and takeout containers, he felt something shift in his chest. The weight of pretending lifting, replaced by the lighter, more terrifying weight of possibility. "Susan," he called out, "for what it's worth, I don't think this is going to fail. I think we're going to be annoyingly successful at this whole family thing. I think we're going to fight and mess up and have no idea what we're doing half the time. But I think we're going to make it." Susan appeared in the kitchen doorway, a tentative smile on her face. "What makes you so sure?" "Because we already have. The hard part. Learning to trust each other, learning to be vulnerable, learning to put someone else's needs ahead of our own. We did that when we thought it was fake. Imagine what we can do when we're actually trying." Susan crossed the kitchen, stood close enough that James could count the flecks of green in her gray eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm terrified that I'm going to wake up and realize I'm not capable of this, that I'm going to fail them the way I failed my sister." "Then we'll fail together," James said, "and we'll get back up together. And we'll keep trying until we get it right. That's what families do." Susan kissed him then, soft and tentative and real. Not for Mrs. Gable's benefit, not for the cameras or the social workers or the court, just for them. Two people who'd found each other in a diner on Christmas Eve and had somehow, against all odds, built something worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Benjamin was awake in his carrier, watching them with solemn eyes. Susan picked him up, settled him on her hip with the casual confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Hey, Benjamin," she whispered. "It's official. You're stuck with us. No contracts, no clauses, no escape hatch. Just family. The messiest, weirdest, most unlikely family in New York. Think you can handle it?" Benjamin grabbed her finger, held tight. James put his arm around Susan's waist, pulled both of them close. In the corner, Maya stirred, opened her eyes. "Did we win?" she asked sleepily. "Is Benjamin staying?" "We won, baby." James confirmed. "He's staying. We're all staying." Maya smiled, came over to wrap her arms around James's waist. The four of them stood in Susan's sterile kitchen as snow fell outside the window, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, James felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because a contract said so, not because money or lawyers or custody evaluations demanded it, but because sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes the most unconventional arrangement turns out to be the most honest thing you've ever done. 6 months later, Susan sold the penthouse. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn with a yard big enough for a swing set and rooms that smell like cinnamon and chaos instead of expensive perfume and loneliness. James started a design firm working from home. Susan cut her hours to 50 per week, learned to leave her phone in another room during dinner. Maya taught Benjamin to crawl, celebrated his first birthday with a cake she decorated herself. Susan framed the first photo Benjamin ever smiled at. Not a professional portrait, but a candid shot James took of Susan making ridiculous faces at 2 a.m. And late at night, when the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet, James and Susan would sit on the couch and marvel at what they'd built from a desperate deal in a diner on Christmas Eve. You know what's funny? Susan said one night, her head on James's shoulder. I spent my whole life thinking family was about blood and tradition and doing things the right way. Turns out it's about showing up when it matters. It's about midnight fevers and torn contracts and choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Turns out, James agreed, family is whatever you make it, however you make it, as long as you make it with love. They'd started with a contract. They'd built a home. And in the end, that made all the difference. Some families are born and some are built by choice. If this story touched your heart, share it with one person today. Subscribe to join our family of storytellers. Thank you for watching until the very end.